Hello world. Now, I want you to look at these two pictures. So the follicular phase and the luteal phase. So I just got this off the internet. This is not me. This woman just was being funny. So she took a picture of herself during the follicular phase. She's all dolled up. She looks so happy. She looks so pretty. This is, yay, I'm follicular. And then also me during the luteal phase. Okay, right? I don't want to look at anybody. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to do my hair. I don't want to mess with you. If you look back at this picture, the hormone surge that's happening during the follicular phase, the first 14 days, the estradiol primarily here, is responsible for the happiness of the follicular phase. Most women are happier during their follicular phase because of this spike of estradiol. And they do not feel so happy during the luteal phase, especially the last section of that, where you're getting ready to menstruate. The last week before menstruation is called the PMS week, because you can have premenstrual syndrome, and that is where you feel all kinds of grumpy with people. So let's talk about the emotional changes that are tied to this cycle. Estradiol not only makes you feel happy, but it also combats the effects of the stress hormones cortisol and adrenaline. So even if you're stressed during the estradiol surge, you still feel happier. Women generally are happier during the follicular phase. So fertility, when you can get pregnant, is a very small window of time. It is shortly before, during, and after ovulation. If you don't get pregnant during that time, you won't get pregnant that month. So during the period of fertility, shortly before fertility, when women are fertile, many studies have shown they tend to wear more makeup, take more physical care of their appearance, dress sexier. They buy more things to make themselves look good. They have a higher pain tolerance. They also tend to flirt more during their fertile cycle, or if they have a sexual partner already, they tend to have more sex during the fertile cycle. Now, I had an interesting time looking at the research for the next statement. Men report women are more attractive at this time. This was interesting. There's been studies where they took the smell of women, so they swabbed women, and they put them in little baggies, and then they had men smell. And men reported that the smell of fertile women's smell was more attractive. They also had another study I found interesting where men were just listening to the voices of fertile women versus infertile women. And they reported that the fertile women had more attractive voices. Of course, they didn't know which was which, right? They just said, this voice is more attractive than that one, or whatever. The voice itself, no visual, nothing, just the voice, was more attractive to them during the fertility section. And of course, they also did comparisons where they took the same woman and they took pictures of her during her fertile cycle and when she was not fertile, and they, compared all these different women's pictures of being fertile and not fertile. They didn't tell the men which was which, and they had them gauge these women's pictures, just the picture, on whether they were more attractive or less attractive. And across the board, men reported that women looked more attractive when they were fertile. So they smell more attractive, they sound more attractive, and they look more attractive. It is very obvious that the male and female body is designed to alert the male brain to the fact that a woman is ovulating. Okay? Because when she is ovulating, she's fertile. When she's fertile, she can make a baby. And that is the point of the cycle when the men are like, hey, I really like the way you're looking, smelling, tasting, feeling, whatever. It's all designed to continue the baby making process and, of course, the human race. So I thought you might find that interesting. However, and there's always a however, right? All of this comes to a crashing halt once the hormone levels drop below the point of a possible pregnancy at about day 20. So 3 weeks in, 3 weeks after you started your period, during the luteal phase, so about midway through the luteal phase. Realizing there's no baby coming, the body begins the process to start menstruation. Okay, so it doesn't just like shed all that blood and tissue all like snap done at once. It takes 7 days to start detaching the connections between the woman's blood supply and the endometrial lining. And so as this process begins, 7 days out, um, the hormone levels start dropping. And the emotional levels, although women generally may not be aware of this, the emotional levels follow the hormonal levels exactly. They may not be conscious of the reason why, but most women will have a period of emotional depression at this point if they have ovulated. Now, if they're not ovulating, they're not hitting the huge spike of happiness, and so the crush of the not happiness happening isn't as, you know, horrible. It's not as abrupt. So a non-fertile woman who doesn't ovulate may not experience the same kind of hormonal emotional crash. There have been studies that found that the hormonal so-called trough of despair is tied very closely to suicide attempts and to violent crime committed by women. So one study I found said that most girls who ended up in juvenile detention for doing something that was against the law, did so when they were PMSing, when they were right before their periods. They also, in the same study, found that most of the suicide attempts in juvenile happened during the PMS period, and most female, not female, not created, most females commit murder during their PMS cycle. So if you're going to be talking about the most dangerous time to be around a woman and to piss her off, it's a week before her period, okay? That is the time when most women, if they are going to commit murder, tend to commit murder or tend to kill themselves. So this is obviously really important to know your cycle, right? Because if you know what's going on, you can say, you know what? I might feel like killing myself right now, but since I happen to know I'm on day 20 and it is natural and normal for me to be depressed, I'm going to sit with my body and recognize, body, okay, we're not pregnant. That's a bummer. But we're still not going to kill ourselves because, hey, well, let's have another shot at getting pregnant next month. So just hold on, okay? I know it feels like the end of the world. I know it feels like there's no point in living, but body, we need to hold on one more week because if we can, then the emotions will start getting better, the hormones will start getting back up, and life will look a lot rosier. Okay? This is really important to know your cycle. Now, there's physical changes tied to the cycle as well. During the luteal phase, okay, that is the second half. The uterus is at its most full. The lining gets to be the thickest lining it's going to be. This means that you can have more pain associated with your full uterus feeling. Also, you probably are going to feel like you need to pee more. Then we'll see in the next picture that the uterus actually sits on top of the bladder. And so when the uterus gets heavier and bigger, it makes the bladder want to get emptier faster. So falling hormone levels affect many things. So for example, for teen girls, this is something that you might want to know, is that when your hormone levels start falling due to the fact that you are not fertile anymore, the last half of your cycle, your skin pH actually changes. So most of us have a skin pH that's acidic. And that is good because the skin pH that's acid kills off bacteria. Bacteria prefer basic pH. But that pH is affected to a more basic side during the last section of your periods, your cycle, which means that bacteria start to spread and thrive on your skin better during the last 2 weeks of your cycle. So what you need to know is that it's a really important time of the month, especially if you have acne, to use an acidic skin rinse. You can get witch hazel, you can use a specific salicylic acid rinse. You put it on a cotton pad, you wipe your face down during this part of the cycle, and it will control the growth of bacteria that you can't help the fact that your skin pH is changing, but you can manually change the skin pH of your face to a more acidic pH by using these body products. And that's the only reason why they work. Salicylic acid, the anti-acne medicine, it works because it's acid. And our skin likes acid, bacteria hate acid. Okay? Like I mentioned before, men rated women's photos and voices and smells as more attractive when they were fertile rather than not. So there must be something going on physically that is visually able to be seen in a photograph. There must be something going on to the voice that can be told just in a recording that makes a change, but we don't actually know exactly what it is. And finally, this was interesting. One study found that erotic dancers, female erotic dancers, made the most tips when they were fertile. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that there. Now let's look at this picture here. As I said, the uterus sits on top of the bladder. If you look here, the bladder is this kind of shiny looking balloon that they don't actually even have labeled. So here's the uterus. It's kind of a eggplant shaped thing with the cervix, the opening to the uterus, facing the inside of the vagina. Okay, now remember the vagina is the courtyard for the sperm depositing. This is where the penis inserts, deposits sperm right outside the cervix. Okay, so actually talking about the sexual aspect, when a penis touches the cervix, during sex, the cervix actually moves. It's kind of crazy, kind of cool, but during sexual stimulation, the cervix moves. It goes down closer to the entry of the vagina so that no matter what size or shape of penis, it is positioned in place to be ready for sperm. And when the cervix moves down, if the penis and the cervix are touching, that excites the penis. That's part of the biofeedback loop for the male sexual excitement, and it triggers the release of sperm or orgasm. And the penis touching the cervix itself excites the female sexual response cycle so that the actual uterine walls begin to convulse. They have a muscular spasm, and that muscular spasm is actually the female orgasm, which is triggered by the touching of the cervix by the penis. This is why sex without a penis inside a woman does not create the same kind of orgasm as having a penis inside. You can create a different kind of orgasm by touching the clitoris, which is at the front of the female body. This is the only point of the clitoris is to create and receive sexual stimulus to get the female body ready for sex. And so that can create a kind of orgasm, but the full orgasm, the full muscular contraction of the uterus, that is the female orgasm, must be stimulated by a cervical touch. Okay? Now, of course, let's just review basic biology. Women have 3 holes. You have your hole where the pee comes out. That's the first hole. Nothing goes in there unless, of course, you're about to go in for surgery and they're putting a catheter up in there, which is horribly painful. And generally speaking, nothing should go in there. The next hole, that's the opening to the vagina, which is where you have your penis entry spot. And of course, the final hole is where the poop comes out. And that is the entry to the descending colon, like I mentioned, which is where all of the poop is getting formed and ready for pooping out. Over here, you can see in the back above the uterus and tied to the uterus, you have the ovary kind of snuggled up. You have your fimbriae from the fallopian tubes snuggled up right next to the ovary, and then the fallopian tube going down on the other side where you can't see it, entering into the uterus. So cycle tracking is important to consider how much of your behavior is affected by your hormones. And to do that, you can tie it into your hormone cycle by being aware of where you are in your hormone cycle. It's really important for every woman to chart her cycle because one, you might have never found this person interesting, but then all of a sudden they're the cutest thing you've ever seen. Oh, it's 'cause I'm fertile. That's why. Maybe I shouldn't approach this person for sex while I'm fertile because maybe I really don't like them that much and it's just my body trying to get me pregnant. Okay? So you need to know that. You need to be aware of that. You also need to be aware that you may be feeling suicidal not because you're actually suicidal, but because you're hormonal at the end of your cycle. There are many, many apps that assist in tracking. This is really helpful if you are trying to not get pregnant. Knowing when you're fertile prevents you from having sex during that time or unprotected sex so you don't get pregnant. And there's a whole lot of fertility monitors on the market that allow you to track your fertility using your body temperature, your cervical mucus, and your saliva. Now, finally, I can't conclude a section on the female cycle without talking about menstruation. So there's a lot of different options out there. You can see the disposable pad in the picture up there. That's actually my toddler thought it was really funny and he wanted to decorate a wall with some disposable pads. So yeah, that's that. Unfortunately, the minus on disposable pads is they can actually cause an allergic reaction to some women, and they don't realize that their privates are getting sore and swollen because they're actually allergic to their disposable pad. So it's good to be aware of that. If you are allergic to the chemicals in those disposable pads, and they are chock full of chemicals, by the way, um, then you can get cloth pads. I mean, it seems a little fashioned going way back to the 1930s or whatever, but they're reusable. You just need to wash them. So you can make your own. All you're doing is really just putting some extra cotton up in there to catch the blood. And if you're okay with washing them, then there's some really cute stuff out there you can actually buy. Tampons. I have to mention this because a lot of people don't realize how dangerous tampons are. Tampons, once inside the vaginal area, like I said, it's designed for a lot of abuse, but a tampon is so supremely absorbent, it not only absorbs the menstrual blood, it also can absorb all the natural liquids inside the vagina. And so as a woman moves and the tampon gets moved around, it actually starts rubbing the inside of the vagina raw. Now, how does that sound for pleasant? No, it's terrible. It leads to irritation, bacteria start going crazy. Um, Sometimes you start getting a smell there because it's creating a very bad area, a very bad problem with bacteria. And not only that, there's a deadly, potentially deadly disease called toxic shock syndrome, TSS, that can kill you. And that comes from bacteria crawling up the cord to the tampon. I mean, how revolting is that, right? Ooh, okay. So I don't recommend tampons. one-time use, they still mess you up inside. What I think is probably the most hygienic product on the market right now are the silicone cups, and these are reusable. So I have a picture here of the Happy Cup. I just thought it was a funny name. Um, there's the Luna Cup. There's a whole bunch of different cups. There's actually reusable cups where you're meant to take it out, clean it, put it back in. And there's disposable cups. There's a company called Instead that was making disposable cups where you take it out and throw it away. These are cheaper and they are also the best in terms of keeping any allergies down and keeping bacterial growth down. So they're the least smelly as well. Um, they come in different shapes and sizes, and since every single woman's body is unique, you might not find one version comfortable, but another version might be. And so if you bought something and it doesn't feel comfortable or it doesn't work with your body, just try another brand. They are very cheap if you consider how much pads cost on a month.